안녕하세요.
The city of Seoul buzzed with neon lights and gleaming skyscrapers. From the top of the imposing Kang Group building, Kang Ji-hoon gazed out at the city through the glass of his impeccably organized office. He was the youngest CEO to ever lead his family's business empire, known for his cold demeanor and unwavering composure. Nothing ever slipped out of his control until a simple employee crossed his path. On the lower floor, Yoon-hari, a young woman with a sincere smile and bright eyes, meticulously organized documents. The daughter of a small merchant, she worked tirelessly to support her family and pay off the debts that plagued them. To her, Ji-hoon was nothing more than an untouchable legend within the company. Everything changed when an urgent meeting was scheduled at the last minute. Hari was tasked with delivering an essential contract to Ji-hoon, and in her rush, she stumbled as she entered the conference room. Papers flew through the air, and a brief silence took over the room as the shareholders looked on in shock. Ji-hoon lifted his eyes from the document and stared at the young woman kneeling on the floor, hurriedly gathering the papers with trembling hands. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kang," Hari stammered, her face burning with embarrassment. The CEO maintained his unreadable expression and picked up the papers that had landed on the table. In an unexpected gesture, he calmly handed them back to Hari, without a single word of reprimand. "Make sure to be more careful next time," he said, his voice low but firm. Hari quickly nodded and hurried out of the room. However, something about the scene remained etched in Ji-hoon's mind. He didn't know why, but that moment lingered uncomfortably in his memory. The next day, during an internal conference, Ji-hoon found himself watching Hari without realizing it. She worked diligently, her expression focused as she typed up reports. For the first time in a long while, he caught himself being interested in something that wasn't strictly business-related. At the end of the workday, when Hari stepped into the elevator, Ji-hoon, who rarely used the same transportation as his employee, centered right behind her. A subtle tension filled the air. Hari, nervous, remained silent. "How long have you been working here?" Ji-hoon asked suddenly. Surprised, Hari lifted her eyes to him. "2 years, sir." He nodded slightly, as if storing the information. When the elevator doors opened, Ji-hoon stepped out first, but not before casting one last glance at Hari, intrigued. Something in him was changing, and little did he know that change was only the beginning. In the days following the incident in the meeting room, Kang Ji-hoon found himself unable to ignore Yoon-hari's presence. Every time he passed by the floor where she worked, his eyes searched for her involuntarily. Something about her intrigued him, though he still couldn't understand why. Hari, on the other hand, avoided any direct contact with the CEO. She knew that any involvement with him would be dangerous both for her reputation and her job, but fate seemed to be toying with them. One afternoon, Ji-hoon received an incomplete report and demanded that the document be corrected immediately. Whether by coincidence or not, Hari was the employee chosen to deliver the revised version to his office. She took a deep breath before entering. As she stepped through the door, she found Ji-hoon reclining in his leather chair, his eyes fixed on the computer. Without looking up, he pointed to the desk. "Leave it here." Hari placed the document in the indicated spot and turned to leave. But Ji-hoon's voice stopped her. "Are you afraid of me?" She froze. Slowly, she turned to meet those piercing eyes. "No, sir." Her voice came out hesitant. Ji-hoon finally lifted his gaze and studied her for a moment. Then, as if testing something, he said, "Then why do you avoid me?" Hari swallowed hard. She didn't know how to answer without putting herself in a difficult position. Finally, she opted for partial honesty. "I don't want to cause any trouble at work." Ji-hoon leaned back in his chair, a faint smile on his lips. "Interesting." Before Hari could ask what he meant by that, Ji-hoon stood up and picked up the document from the desk. He flipped through a few pages before looking at her again. "You're efficient. You've been working here for 2 years, right?" "Yes, sir. I'll need a personal assistant for a few weeks. Someone to review contracts and accompany me to meetings. I think you'll do." "Ha." Ri's heart pounded. "Me? But sir, I'm not qualified for that." Ji-hoon observed her for a moment before responding. "I decide who is qualified or not." A chill ran down Ri's spine. Refusing a direct order from the CEO wasn't an option. Even knowing that this could bring her trouble, she simply nodded. Yes, sir. Ji-hoon's smile deepened slightly, satisfied. We start tomorrow morning. Be in my office at 8 sharp. As Hari left the office, she felt as if she had just stepped into a minefield. She didn't know what Ji-hoon truly wanted with this, but one thing was certain: he was getting closer, and she wasn't sure if she could resist. The days passed quickly, and the dynamic between Kang Ji-hoon and Yoon Hari shifted with every encounter. She tried to remain professional, but the CEO made a point of challenging her limits. Small moments of closeness became inevitable: a gaze held for too long, the brush of fingers while exchanging documents, silences laden with unspoken meanings. However, their growing proximity did not go unnoticed. During a luxurious family dinner, Ji-hoon found himself cornered by his mother, the sophisticated Madame Kang, and his father, Kang Dae-jung, the powerful chairman of the board. They had always had grand plans for him, and those plans did not include a low-ranking employee. "They're talking about you at work, Ji-hoon," his mother said, placing her wineglass down with calculated elegance. "They say you've been giving too much attention to an employee." Ji-hoon kept his expression impassive, calmly bringing his glass to his lips before replying. "I don't care about gossip." His father, who had remained silent until then, let out a heavy sigh. "I expected more from you. Kang Group is an empire that requires cold and logical decisions. If you continue with this distraction, the shareholders will start questioning your leadership." Ji-hoon had known this conversation would happen sooner or later. He maintained his composure and responded firmly. "My performance has never been in question. The company continues to grow under my management." Madame Kang smiled, but there was no warmth in her expression. "Sweetheart, this isn't just about work. It's about your future. There's a charity gala this weekend. We've invited Miss Choi Si-ra. She is a much more suitable match for you." Ji-hoon suppressed his irritation. Choi Si-ra was the daughter of one of the group's most powerful shareholders. He knew his family wanted to arrange a marriage for business interests, but the idea had never appealed to him. "I'm not interested." "Don't be immature," his father retorted, his voice heavy with authority. "If you continue getting involved with this employee, you won't just destroy your own reputation, you'll destroy hers as well. It would be cruel of you to expose her to something that can never be." Ji-hoon remained silent, but his hands clenched under the table. He hadn't expected Hari to be dragged into this conflict so soon. He would not allow his family to harm her. That night, as he left the mansion, he took out his phone and typed a message. "Ji-hoon, are you busy? I need to see you." Across the city, Hari stared at the message, a chill running down her spine. Something told her this conversation would change everything. Yoon Hari waited anxiously in the small cafe near her home. The cozy, discreet place was one of her favorite refuges. But that night, her heart was restless. The serious tone of Ji-hoon's message had left her nervous. When he finally walked through the door, looking effortlessly elegant even in casual attire, Hari felt her stomach turn. Ji-hoon approached the table and sat across from her. His gaze was intense, as if he were fighting an internal battle. "Did something happen?" Hari asked hesitantly. He sighed, resting his elbows on the table. "My family knows about you." Her eyes widened. "What? But I didn't do anything wrong." Her voice came out louder than she expected. Ji-hoon raised a hand, trying to calm her. "I know, but in the world I was raised in, it doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. What matters is where you come from and what you represent." Hari felt the weight of those words. The abyss between their realities became more evident with each passing day. "They want me to stay away from you," he continued, his voice softer. "My parents are pressuring me to consider an arranged marriage." Hari lowered her gaze. A tightness in her chest came instantly. She had always known Ji-hoon belonged to a different world, but hearing it out loud hurt more than she had imagined. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ji-hoon studied her for a long moment before answering. "I'm not giving up on you." "Ha!" Rai's heart stopped for a second. She lifted her eyes, meeting the seriousness in his. "It's not that simple, Ji-hoon. Your family could make my life impossible. I could lose my job, my stability." He took her hands across the table, holding them gently. I know, and that's why I need you to trust me. I'm willing to face all of this, but I need to know if you are too. Hari felt tears threatening to surface. It was an impossible choice. But when she looked at Ji-hoon, she saw something she never expected to find in the eyes of such a powerful man: vulnerability. She took a deep breath before answering. If you're by my side, I'll face anything. The smile Ji-hoon gave her was the most sincere she had ever seen. He lifted her hands to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss on them. Then it's official. I won't let anything or anyone come between us. Hari knew the challenges were only beginning, but for the first time, she felt she wasn't facing them alone. The following days were a true test for Ji-hoon and Hari. The Kang family made sure to make her life unbearable within the company. Rumors began spreading through the hallways. Judgmental glances followed her everywhere, and even her responsibilities were drastically reduced. It was a clear strategy: pressure her until she gave up on her own. But Hari would not be defeated so easily. Instead of backing down, she worked even harder, proving to everyone that her professional worth was not tied to her relationship with Ji-hoon. However, the hardest blow came from where she least expected. On a tense morning, Hari was summoned to a meeting with the company's board. When she entered the conference room, she found Lady Kang seated at the head of the table, her expression cold and calculating. "Yoon-ha, thank you for coming," she said, her tone falsely cordial. "Let's be direct. If you truly care about Hoon, you know the best thing you can do for him is to disappear." Hari felt the impact of those words but maintained her composure. "Lady Kang, with all due respect, my relationship with Ji-hoon does not affect my professional abilities." The woman smiled, but her eyes were filled with menace. "The world doesn't run on effort alone, my dear. There is power, influence, and tradition. You will never be accepted in this circle. And Ji-hoon has a greater responsibility than his feelings." Before Hari could respond, the door swung open, and Ji-hoon entered, his gaze burning with fury. "So this is what you're doing? Trying to intimidate her?" He looked directly at his mother, defiant. Lady Kang sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. "I'm only ensuring you don't ruin your life over an illusion." Ji-hoon walked over to Hari and took her hand firmly. "If being with her is an illusion, then it's the only one I want to live in. And if the company can't accept that, then maybe it's time for me to leave." The room fell into absolute silence. "You wouldn't dare." His father spoke for the first time. Ji-hoon met his gaze with unwavering determination. "Try and stop me." Hari felt her eyes fill with tears. She never imagined Ji-hoon would go this far for her. Lady Kang closed her eyes for a moment before rising from her seat. "Do whatever you want, Ji-hoon, but know that if you make a mistake, there will be no place for you to return to." Ji-hoon squeezed Hari's hand even tighter and smiled at her. "I already have everything I need." At that moment, they knew they were standing together against the world. But to their surprise, they weren't alone. As they stepped out of the room, they found several employees watching, and one by one, they began to clap. Perhaps their love wasn't so impossible after all. The following days were a mix of challenges and new beginnings for Ji-hoon and Hari. After Ji-hoon's bold declaration before the board, the shareholders were divided. Some saw him as reckless, while others admired his courage. To the surprise of many, the company's stock remained stable, proving that his leadership did not depend on blind approval from his family. But the greatest battle was yet to come. One night, Ji-hoon was summoned for a final meeting with his parents. In the grand hall of the Kang mansion, he found his father seated in a leather armchair, while his mother kept her gaze fixed on the burning fireplace. "Do you really intend to go through with this?" Kang Dae-jung asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Ji-hoon stood firm. "Yes, I love her, and nothing will change that." Lady Kang let out a deep sigh before finally looking at him. "You've always been stubborn." But she exchanged a glance with her husband before continuing. "If you're going to do this, do it properly. We don't want scandals. And I hope she understands the responsibility she will have when joining this family." Ji-hoon could hardly believe it. After so much resistance, his family was relenting. Perhaps it wasn't full acceptance, but it was enough to take the next step. 6 months later, spring bloomed in Seoul. In the garden of a luxurious hotel, Friends and family gathered for one of high society's most anticipated events, the wedding of Kang Ji-hoon and Yoon Ha-ri. Ha-ri walked down the white carpet, wearing a modern hanbok blended with a traditional wedding dress. Her heart pounded as she saw Ji-hoon waiting for her at the altar, immaculate in his black suit. Their eyes met, and in that instant, all their struggles felt worth it. When the officiant asked the final question, Ji-hoon held Ha-ri's hand and answered without hesitation, "I do, forever." And Ha-ri, with tears in her eyes, smiled before responding, "I do too." The kiss sealed not only the ceremony, but the beginning of a new life together. Among the guests, even Lady Kang allowed herself a small, discreet smile. Perhaps, in the end, love was a business just as valuable as any empire. A few years later, the laughter of a child echoed through the garden of the Kang mansion. Ji-hoon, now a devoted father, ran after a little girl with dark hair who looked remarkably like Ha-ri. She giggled as she hid behind her mother, who watched the scene with a serene smile. Ha-ri looked at Ji-hoon, and without needing words, she knew they had won every battle, and that, from then on, each day would be a new chapter in their own love story.